So next up we're going to discuss the iteration retrospective. My name is Thomas Schmidt, I work in Satus in Odense, and I hope you'll enjoy the following minutes where we're going to review the process of executing a retrospective after the iteration. The agenda is that we're going to look at the what, who, why and when aspects of the retrospective, and we're going to start out by looking at what a retrospective is. A retrospective is an activity for the entire team in the iteration where the team reflects on the past in order to improve stuff that may happen in the future. So you review and you set some goals and you follow up on the goals. Who do participate in the retrospective? The team, as I just mentioned, is a natural choice. So you'll have a product manager, you'll probably have some developers and some quality assurance. There's most likely a internal product owner present. And then you'll have a facilitator, or at least a guy from the project team acting as a facilitator, and the facilitator is the guy, girl, leading the meeting. In larger retrospective implementations, you should preferably get a external facilitator, one who is more objective, but since you'll have a iteration retrospective quite often, it's a good idea just to include somebody from the team to do it. So why do we have a retrospective? The primary reason is to learn, of course, and to improve. But besides that, the iteration may have included unforeseen things and stuff you didn't actually expect to occur during the iteration, and you may also have experienced events that you'll need to discuss in plenum in order to move on. But also, namely, the primary aspects of the iteration is learning and perhaps process improvement, and you are likely to increase your team spirit since you're cooperating and you're discussing things that happened to you, and this may also affect in some personal or collective growth. The reason why we have an iteration retrospective is that namely that we're going to learn from the past. And this talk is just on the iteration retrospective, but actually the retrospectives can be deployed throughout the project lifecycle implementations. But we are just going to discuss the how of the iteration retrospective. So we're going to look at a set of relatively generic stages within the retrospective. The first step is to initiate the retrospective. Primarily, you should set a set of ground rules which everybody in the team will apply to. A relatively famous facilitator guy defines something called the prime directive, where the baseline for participating in the retrospective is that everybody should acknowledge that everybody did their best at any time in the project with the tools they have available. So you should not, the retrospective is not a cause for blame shifting or pointing fingers, but rather collective learning. Furthermore, another purpose is also to energize the team, so when the retrospective is completed, they'll go out and they'll attack the upcoming iteration with new courage and lots of energy. So the next step is reviewing the goals from the previous retrospective. You'll go through the set of goals you defined in the previous iteration and follow up on them, discuss whether or not they've been met and how they can be met in the future by improving stuff that you obviously didn't do in the previous iteration. Having done this, you should move on to get a temperature reading on the current iteration by gathering some data, and this is done by a round robin style collecting data, where you let everybody think for a little while, do some brainstorming on their own, and they start by writing all the things down that went well in the iteration retrospective, and they can do this on green or yellow sticky notes, whatever. and when they do this, when they have done this, you just start at one end and people read out what they wrote down, and you shouldn't comment on what people read out because this is a brainstorming session and you can discuss the items later on. Having discussed all the stuff that went well, you should move on to the stuff that can be improved or stuff that didn't go very well. And you could write this down on red notes or whatever you want to do. So having collected all the data, you should move on to deciding what to do next. In this phase, we review the collected data. So you could group them into all the positive and the not so positive things on a whiteboard or whatever tool you want to use. And based on these group of items, the team identifies a set of goals for the upcoming iteration, stuff that they want to improve on. And these goals should be SMART. So they should be specific, attainable, measurable, timely, and relevant in SMART order. Okay. So, with the goals at hand, the facilitator can close the retrospective. And this last step just briefly includes recapping what the team has been through and that it hopefully was a positive experience. Perhaps you could discuss what can be improved for the next iteration retrospective. And you should also close the retrospective by giving appreciations in a way that is meaningful to the recipient. This is actually quite a good exercise in improving the level of trust and openness within the team. But speak in a language that makes sense. If hugs and kisses are out of order, then just a briefly shoulder clap saying you're cool will probably do just fine. Okay, I hope this, even though it may have been a little disturbing, I won't provide a disclaimer, but I hope you enjoyed this talk on the iteration retrospectives, and if you have any further questions, please contact me or anybody in the quality circle. We'll be happy to help.